Hello and welcome back to the GorillaBiker, to a video type that I haven't done in a long time. I get asked about a lot, but I'm honestly very rarely excited by new bikes. And this is a bike I was not expecting, and I am excited about it, and that is the 2025, as they call it over here, 2024, CF Moto 675SS. Now, I'm sure the other bike you may or may not be able to read. I'll do a little slow pan across this, but we're going to be talking through everything on here. These are kind of the things that jumped out to me most. We'll obviously talk about aesthetics and other pieces, but also the 2017/18 Triumph Daytona 675R, and because that's almost immediately what kind of leapt out at me as oh, it's like a newer, slower Daytona. But I mean, in the way the motorcycle industry is going, this is a really exciting bike, and kind of literally hats off to CF Moto for making something like this, because you know, if I was to ever sell the Z900RS or whatever else and had some cash in my life to spend on another bike, I would probably buy this. Genuinely, I mean, it's kind of exciting. So if you haven't heard, CF Moto have been kind of knocking it out of the park a little bit with like the 450 MT. They're kind of adventure-y bikes, and a lot of their other bikes that other manufacturers aren't really doing, especially not at the price point, and we'll talk about that later in the video. But if you haven't heard, CF Moto are releasing a triple sports bike, and it looks kind of great. I'll put a photo up on screen, but it legitimately is a good looking bike. Some silly bits on there that I personally, I mean, like, maybe you can take, well, you can definitely take one or two of them off, I hope. And other bits, it's kind of like, it looks cool, but it's like, is it functional? I don't know. And I'm a mechanical engineer. I am function over form every day of the week. But if it does kind of look cool, I'm okay with it. So let's get straight into the things that I think a lot of people are going to be interested in. And again, I'm kind of using the Daytona as a comparison. And when we get to the price, I know a lot of people will be like, oh, they're not the same type of bike, but they also are. They're both sports bike triples. And unfortunately, the 675 Daytona is no longer available, and there's also not a 765 Daytona available. There was the limited edition one, but we definitely couldn't afford. We being me and my ilk, the collectors of older or slightly damaged bikes, other than the V-Strom. The V-Strom was bought magnificent. Anyway, if you're not a follower of the channel, you don't know about any of my bikes. But basically, the CF Moto has 95 horsepower, at peak 95 horsepower at 11k RPM. And I want everyone to bear something in mind here. These are all numbers right now. And what really excites me about looking at a lot of this stuff is, you know, this is all like modern compliancy things. So there's definitely weight to be shaved off here. And there's also power to be added from like tuning and new exhaust and stuff. I did forget to translate my pounds to kilos, so let me do that real quick. I'm sure there's going to be some people who look at these and are like, oh, you rounded it. Yeah, I did. Okay, I rounded it slightly. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, 95 horsepower, 11k RPM. That's an appreciable amount of horsepower, especially when you consider with an exhaust and a tune, that's probably going to be over 100 brake horsepower, which is quite a bit for a bike that weighs 195 kilos wet, or 194.5. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because obviously I am comparing these, but something to look at. And when we get to the price, I think it's more of an interesting thing. But the Daytona was 126 at 12,500 RPM, so it revved higher and had considerably more power. The CF Moto has 70 Newton meters of torque, or 51.6 at 8250. What's interesting to me about this is CF Moto haven't released, that I can find, their compression ratio. So I'd really like to know. It seems to be, looking at where the torque peaks in comparison to the Daytona, for instance, it does have more mid-range torque, because that peaks at 8250 RPM. The Daytona from 2017-18 peaked at 74 Newton meters, so slightly more torque but at 11.9k RPM. I would really like, and I might do a follow-up on this if I ever get the information, but like overlay dyno sheets from these two bikes. Obviously, there's lots of dyno sheets available for the Daytona. I couldn't find anything for the CF Moto yet, but that would be super interesting to me. And genuinely, I don't make these type of videos very often because honestly, most bikes just don't excite me when they're announced anymore. Like genuinely, like, ooh, I wanna, you know, take it. But this one genuinely has. I don't know, did I write down? No, I didn't write down. I know I did look up, and obviously the compression ratio is available for the Daytona. And why compression ratio is important, by the way, is it does affect the characteristics of an engine and how it does perform. So there might even be more performance to be gained on the CF Moto if people were to, you know, put on a thinner head gasket, etc. There are options there. But we don't need to get into that right now. Something else that might interest other people, because the rake combined with the wheelbase will obviously affect how a bike handles, but the CF Moto has a 23.7 degree rake, and that's basically your forks and your whole steering angle. And the Daytona had 23 degree rake. So that combined with the fact that the wheelbase on the Daytona was 1 inch shorter, for sure the Daytona would be a more nimble bike. Again, not that huge a difference. 1 inch, I mean, 1 inch is a lot actually. Huge amount. Don't let anyone tell you any different. Another thing that's, I think, more important than, you know, wheelbase and rake and whatnot, and this just to me just does say that the Daytona obviously is it's a very nimble bike. It's known to be a nimble bike, and it would be more nimble than the CF Moto theoretically. The one that's interesting to me is the CF Moto at its current thing, and there is one thing to note, that there has been a mistake called out by another guy who did a really good review on the 450 MT. I'll link it in the description if I remember. But they did have their wet weight wrong in their documentation. So the one that I could find in their documentation, the wet weight, really hard to say that, is 194.5 kg or 429 pounds for the CF Moto. That's pretty light. Now, why that's interesting is when I took the bread box and replaced the bread box with just Delcovic headers on my Z900RS, that shaved off 11 pounds. If you were to take off 11 pounds from the CF Moto, you are down much closer to where the Daytona is. That is a considerable amount of weight. So there might be savings to be made there. Not only if you just do if you do a full system, you could possibly save more than that, because there is a lot of weight in those modern bread boxes. And let's be honest, we all remove them, you know what I mean? Fix cruise ships first, people, before you go after motorcycle exhausts. But anyway, the next part that I think is really going to, it captured my attention, and I think it should capture a lot of people's attention, because I think not enough manufacturers are really doing more affordable bikes anymore. But this piece, to me, is very exciting. The CF Moto, brand new in America right now, is $8,000 MSRP. Now that obviously doesn't include your taxes and all that stuff out the door. So we'll call it 9,000, maybe 9,500 out the door. But back in the day, the Daytona was 13,500 MSRP. And as far as I can find, that is the base model that was available over here. Obviously it's no longer 2017, 2018. But if you were to apply, you know, inflation to this, I mean, actually, I'll just check. So just using the first inflation calculator I pulled up online, in today's money, 13,500 in 2018 in the US would be pretty much $17,000 now. So if that was the case, this would be even more impressive, because even as it is, that's $5,500 different, because you'd have roughly the same taxes and title fees and all that stuff over here. $5,500 buys you a lot of tires. It buys you your exhaust system. It buys you your tune. It buys you all these other things that you may or may not want to do with your bike. $5,500 is a lot. $5,500 for, even if we call this 100 brake horsepower after a tune and exhaust and stuff, you're going to have as much fun on the track with this as this. You know what I mean? And in reality, sports bikes, a lot of the time, they're for curvy roads, they're for the track. I have, obviously, my Gixxer 750 was theoretically, supposedly 120 something odd brake horsepower, and that was a lot of fun. The Z900RS is, you know, roughly 100-ish brake horsepower. It's a lot of fun, but it weighs, the Z900RS weighs like considerably more than the CF Moto, so this would probably feel considerably faster, especially since it's, you know, it's a sports bike. It's set up for that. But that's insane. Like the price for this bike, genuinely, if I didn't have the Z900RS, or even if I sell it, I kind of really want to buy one of those, because I think it's a really good looking bike, and we'll talk about that later. Right now, I just wanted to kind of run through all these things that popped out to me as the most interesting components for this bike. Next kind of difference is 15-litre fuel tank on the CF Moto versus 17.4 on the Daytona, and I think this was cheating a little bit, and I think you were being a little bit cheeky, CF Moto, because obviously they can advertise a not considerably, but they can advertise a lighter wet weight, because obviously it's, you know, 2.5 litres less fuel than you'd get on your average bike. Most bikes are around that, you know, 16, 17 litres. And, you know, I mean, the only time this would ever affect you is if you decided to do endurance racing on a CF Moto. You're going to have to stop slightly more, depending on how good it is on fuel. Next kind of interesting difference for me is they're using J1 brakes on the CF Moto, which I've only ever used on a Zero when I got to test ride a Zero SRF. Really good brakes. They felt great on the Zero. How they'll feel on this, I don't know. Another interesting thing to note there is Brembo actually did buy J1, so they're kind of Brembos. However, the Daytona did have Brembo monoblocks, which are absolutely phenomenal brakes. I have had the luck to use them on track on my uncle's Gixxer track bike once, and those things are absolutely phenomenal. Unbelievable brakes. They're just great. So I mean, that is obviously one thing, that there is value in that price difference in, you know, brakes to brakes or whatever. And the one thing that I really hope CF Moto do have a tall seat or whatever else, because the seat height for the CF Moto is only 31 inches or 787-ish millimeters versus 32 inches on the Triumph, which is about 812, 813 millimeters. And again, 1 inch, it's huge. It's a huge difference. All joking aside, if you're a taller rider like myself, I'm 6'7", 1 inch on a seat makes a massive difference. So I do hope, if I was to ever go ahead and buy a CF Moto 675SS, I would hope there's a tall seat available, just because it makes life easier. I mean, that 31 inch, if you look at it, is quite sat in the bike, whereas oftentimes I prefer to be kind of sat on the bike, which, you know, a taller seat, it's pretty easy to apply it to give you more room for me on the track and whatnot, which is, I mean, if I was buying this bike, if I ever do buy this bike, it will be definitely tracked. I would love to buy one, to be honest. I genuinely saw this thing and I was like, that's really cool. And honestly, I think that their 500, I think it was a 500 and something SS, it was really cool as well with the twin headlamps and stuff. Like, they're actually making some really nice bikes. And we'll talk about why I think that's really cool at the end of the video. But first, the aesthetics of the CF Moto. So the Daytona is beautiful. We don't need to talk about any of this anymore. I spent all that time writing it out, probably for nothing, because you probably can't even read that. I talked through it, that's all that matters. You know, a couple of other things is, obviously, both of these had slipper clutches and stuff, so I do think, you know, obviously you're paying more for this power in the Daytona back in the day, and you're paying for the Brembos, and the CF Moto comes with KYB suspension. As far as I remember, because I do like Daytonas, I think that Daytona did come as standard with the Öhlins front and back, Öhlins, front and back. So, you know, obviously there's if you were to go and buy that suspension yourself, you're talking a lot of money. Like, you know, that 5,500 would get eaten up into getting, you know, this up to this level with brakes and suspension and whatnot. But I don't think this is ever going to hit the power numbers of the Daytona, for instance. However, super exciting to see, and especially with that inflation adjusted number, I mean, that CF Moto is phenomenal value. A couple of things I don't like about the CF Moto is it has winglets, which are for looks. I mean, come on, you don't need them on that bike. Only professionals need winglets, to be honest, and any form of aerodynamics at all. But the other thing that I saw that I was like, really, it's purely for looks, is brake cooling ducts. Most people are going to use this thing on the street, and you do not need brake cooling ducts on the street unless there is something severely wrong with your brakes, or you're using like a brake pad compound that's has no business being on a modern bike. So I mean, they're cool. It's a nice thing that comes as standard on the bike, but I don't think they're needed. I don't think it makes sense. And, you know, would you be able to get that price slightly lower without them? That'd be cool, you know what I mean? But, you know, I'd probably, if I bought the bike, I'd take those brake cooling ducts off. I don't know. I just would. I think it looks kind of silly. But overall, I think like aesthetically, the bike looks great. And you know, that, like I said, that's something that I think CF Moto have been kind of consistently doing in the last 2 years, especially. The bikes they've been releasing, their 300, their 450, their Naked Series bikes, their adventure bikes. It all looks really good. And I mean, for the price points that they're releasing these things at, I don't want to call them the savior of the motorcycle industry and be all like dramatic and whatnot, but I mean, you know, if you were a young person coming up, I'm not young anymore. I can't say that about myself anymore. I'm 32 now. I started this channel quite a while ago, but like if it was me, even when I started the channel, and I'd had bikes several years before that, obviously as well, but starting the channel, I had my Phaser. If I was in the position where I had my Phaser, I think I spent €3,500 on the Phaser. Like, if you were in a position to get a loan, €3,500 versus, you know, $8,000, and at the time, you know, euro was way stronger than dollar, so maybe it would have even been €6,000, €6,500 for one of these. Yeah, that would make a lot of sense if you wanted a bike like that, which at the time I 100% did. I still do now. Like, that is a really good price for what you get in that package. Like, you get a slipper clutch, you get good brakes, you get your brake cooling ducts, you know, your TFT screen, which a lot of people like. I don't really care about TFT screens. I'm an analog screen guy personally. And I think, you know, a lot of people originally with CF Moto were very much against them because they're Chinese. But I think we've passed that stigma. You know what I mean? Fair enough. In years gone by, it was definitely a kind of a deserved reputation that some Chinese brands were cheap and fell apart a lot easier than their Japanese counterparts. And I'm saying Japanese counterparts because I love Japanese bikes. I think they're phenomenal. Like, however, we might be seeing the new king of value for money very, very soon if CF Moto keep doing what they're doing. And also, I mean, their reliability wise, anyone I know with the CF Moto, and I know quite a few people with CF Motos, because anyone who tells me they have one, I try to keep up with them on how they're going, you know. But, you know, I know a few people with the more adventure-y CF Motos and whatnot, and I know one or two people with the 650 NKs, I think, all love their bikes. You know, they've been really, really impressed with their bikes, and you know, supplying that bike type that a lot of people are screaming out for. Triumph don't make a Daytona anymore, you know what I mean? The R6 is no longer a street legal bike to be sold. You can still get a Gixxer 750. It hasn't been updated in forever. I'd still love to buy a Gixxer 750 brand new, or even the 600. But like, again, even if you go and get a Gixxer 600, which has not been updated in a long time, as far as I remember, and because I'm on the Suzuki site quite a lot, that's at least like $10,000 MSRP, $10,500 MSRP, versus like a bike that it's a triple, which sounds cool. Isn't that much less power again, but like, you know, triple versus four cylinder, you're going to have higher power output from the four cylinder. But for the price difference, I'm telling you, you buy a lot of tires and fuel with even $2,500. I'll actually check how much the Gixxer is. So to compare it to the 2025 Gixxer 600 base model is $12,000. So scratch that, $4,000 difference. That's insane. So I mean, like I said, for me, I think, just a quick recap, aesthetically, I really think it's a good looking bike. Other than those brake cooling ducts, I think they're a little bit silly, but you know, however, we'll forgive them their one little misjudgment. Otherwise, I think it looks great. Even the TFT screen, it all fits together really, really nicely. You know, chuck in an extra couple hundred for a taller seat for me, and that's a pretty good value bike. That's the type of bike that I look at and I say, you know, I could conceivably afford that new. It's a bike I want new because it looks good. Performance specs sound good. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to have to do suspension on any bike I ever buy. It is what it is. I'm a big guy. And even if I was like on death's door, I'm still going to be heavier than the average person because that's life. That's just how it is. But I mean, if you were to look at, for instance, the Gixxer 600, absolutely not. I can't go shell out $12,000 on a brand new Gixxer 600 and then go have to shell out, you know, like at least $1,000 more on everything to make it fit me. Whereas this one, it all comes in under 10,000. I mean, it's a lot of money, and I literally can't go buy one even if I wanted to. But it's a much more reasonable ask, you know, like if I was to sell the Z and sell the V-Strom, I could go buy one and I could do whatever the hell I wanted to it to get it to fit me. I wouldn't have a V-Strom or a Z then, so I'm not going to do that. But this is legitimately a bike that I saw announced and I was like, holy mother of grasshoppers. That is, YouTube doesn't like words anymore. That is a good looking bike that I can see people affording and enjoying, you know, a lot more than someone who wants to go shell out $12,000 plus on a 600 or even a Gixxer 750, which are still on the cheaper end of the spectrum of modern sports bikes. I don't even know how much the current ZX-R is, but I'll check. So the non-ABS version, we'll go with the ABS version because that's the CFMoto's ABS. The ABS version of the current ZX-R is $12,400. So, you know, kind of comparable to the Gixxer 600. And while this is not directly comparable to an inline four, I don't know, hats off to CF Moto. I think it looks great. I think the price is right. I think the performance specs are right. And genuinely, best of luck with it. I hope it sells like hotcakes, and I hope it makes other manufacturers really take a look at what they have been doing and the prices they've been setting. And you know, maybe it will bring some sanity back to, you know, maybe even the sports bike market. I'm just looking at the sports bike market, but like, I couldn't afford to go buy a new V-Strom to replace my V-Strom. Not that I want to, but the new V-Strom 1000s or 1050s, they're just too expensive. And I don't mean from a like, oh, that's greedy corporations. I mean, like, I literally can't afford it. You know what I mean? There's no way I can go and rationalize spending that much money on a motorcycle when I have one that works. And as much problems as the industry is going through with trying to get people buying new motorcycles and whatnot, I think CF Moto might have the secret sauce, which is make them cool, make them slightly cheaper, yet do we lose out in, you know, top-end power and whatnot? Maybe that is the trade-off we have to have, you know what I mean? And I'm okay with that because, you know, you can either have an inline 3, which sounds great, or maybe you can go with your parallel twin, which also, in fairness, this is, you know, the Suzuki parallel twins and whatnot, and the Yamaha R7 and whatnot, they sound great. I prefer the sound of a triple. It has more power, and the price is about the same. So I mean, you could probably, I think that is a directly comparable with an R7 price. From memory, I think the R7 is like about $9,000, which slightly more than that. And I mean, this has more power than an R7. Both look great. I actually love the look of an R7, but this one does kind of outperform it. So it is what it is. So if you've enjoyed this little video about me talking and extolling the virtues of CF Moto, because I think they released a really cool bike, let me know what you think of any of their bikes, but particularly this one, but any of their bikes in their lineup. You know, what would be your personal favorite? Go onto the website, have a look. The website's decent. It's not as good as the Japanese manufacturers, in my opinion, but you know, it is pretty decent to look through all their different models. And just to throw it out there, I am in no way affiliated with CF Moto. They have no idea I exist. It's just really refreshing to see a company release a bike that is relatively more affordable, brand new, while still having pretty good performance specifications. You know what I mean? Time will tell on if it's high quality, if it's gonna last. I can't speak to that. I hope it does. Like, I really hope it does, and I wish them the best of luck with it, because it's cool. And I mean, at the end of the day, the reason I make videos is because I think bikes are cool. So if this is a cool bike that more people can afford, you know, that's what we're here for. So yeah, let me know your thoughts though, and also, do you miss the Daytona? I do miss the Daytona. I would love to buy a Daytona. I nearly did. There was one for sale used for like $6,500 before I bought the Z, but I was like, that was like a 2006 or something Daytona. It was 2006? No, it was newer than that. But it was much older than the Z, and I couldn't rationalize it. So that was that. But yeah, if you watch, thank you very much for watching. Please do leave any thoughts and opinions on CF Moto in general. Like I said, in the comments. I do enjoy comments. It's partially why I still make videos. And yeah, as always, a very special thank you to all of my patrons. I really do appreciate all of your support. You're all great people, except you. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah. And yeah, until next time, thank you again for watching. Adios. Outro crew, if theoretically you had $8,000 to spend, would you buy a 675SS brand new or a used Daytona, whatever year you could get for that price? What would you go for? Used Daytona, brand new 675SS. I would get this 675SS 100%. I really hope I get to ride one because I think they're cool. Yeah, let me know. Bye, Outro crew.